Hi and welcome to First Days with Johanna, this first day 24th of March. I really hope that's right. And we are again back in my studio here in south of Sweden. This is where I dye all the SKeW yarns and a place where I knit and get a lot of ideas. And of course send out packages for you when you order yarn. So I have dye pots going at the moment, so you might hear some clicking noise from the heaters, but I don't know. Let's hope not. It's really warm in here at the moment and the pots are actually heating up quite nicely. So it will be a while before they are ready, so I thought that I'd take this moment to share some knitting with you. This will be a little bit of different episode than what I have done before, because I thought we're gonna have a bit of knitting time together. So I won't be talking about what I'm actually knitting at the moment. I will be knitting on my next design, the Dare to Dream shawl, and talking a bit about that and some design inspiration and some other things about knitting with you while we knit together. So go and I hope you already have it, but if not, go and grab something to drink, a good knitting project, and let's dive into this episode. So I've managed to stop in the middle of a row, so I can't really show you anything at the moment. I need to finish this row before I can show you in all its glory. But this is my latest design. I'm knitting the big size at the moment, and I only have a tiny bit left of my first skein. So the big version will use more than one skein of lace weight yarn. The yarn I'm working with is SKeW Fin. That is 800 meters per 100 grams. So yeah, I've almost put 800 meters into this shawl at the moment. Still a bit to go before it's done. I'm past the halfway point with some measure, so it will be a while more before it's done. But plan is that the pattern will be published on April 7th, and that is quickly coming. So I know I have some knitting time to put into this shawl to make it done and to actually have a photo session with it, so you can see how pretty it is. I have had several test knitters and at least one of them is done with her shawl. So yeah, it was really good, and I'm really thankful for everyone who test knitted this shawl, and there will be more test knitting opportunities in the future. I'm already planning out my next one, and that was part of what I was thinking that we could talk about today, and that is pattern inspiration, because it's always, I at least find it interesting to hear how and where you get inspiration to knit things or to put patterns together. And I'm terribly sorry, there is a bee in here. Very happy that they have woken up, but I think I need to put it outside somehow. Can you see it? There's a bee in here, so we need to let it out so it can do its work, because we need to save all the bees that we can. Okay, the bee is out and we get back to some knitting. I was talking about design processes and how to find some inspiration. It's, for me, it's very different if I'm designing a lace project or if I'm designing like a colorwork project or just, I wouldn't say plain knitting because I rarely do that, but like a bigger no, not bigger either, but a lace project, a lace design, most of the time it starts with some kind of feeling that I want to create in with this lace design and how I can do that. And then I go off searching charts. Actually, it's not that often that I draft the charts from total beginning because I tend to flip through Estonian lace knitting books and look at the charts there. It's not like taking the entire design, it's more like when you have this cake recipe, then you know how to bake a sponge cake, but you add in your own touch on everything of it. So you might have this basic recipe or the base recipe, and then you add on more and more stuff. And that is basically what I'm doing when I'm designing a lace project. I look at the charts and I see what they have done, and I think, I want to use this one, but in order to use that, I needed to have something with it that accompanies it in a good way, and then you go about and find a second one, and then you kind of rearrange them together. So I almost never use a chart 100% as it was represented in the book or in wherever format I found it. Sometimes you need to add a few stitches or you need to tweak it a little bit so it looks the way you want it, and that is definitely what I did with this shawl here. And also for my next design, that is what I have done. So, and for every design I used before, I changed the chart around a little bit so that it suits my project and my knitting style and how I want it to look. And yeah, so basically my lace knitting inspiration, that comes from flipping through lace knitting books to see what they have done before and how I can use that and what feeling I want to put into the project so that I can do that in the best way possible for me. Now, a big shawl, that is quite an undertaking in knitting time, and it's not something that you can just whip out in a week's time. I know for a fact, especially if you have more things going on than just knitting. So that's why in this design process I want to have it test knitted, so I know that the pattern is understandable and that you can easily see what you should do, and also that I see that it works together the way I want it to do. So that's, yeah, and that's part of the test knitting process. And I'm so happy and thankful for everyone who test knitted this shawl. It's so lovely to see the creations, and soon everyone else will see the creations too. And that is, well, coming very soon. Starting next week, we start to drop some things so you can see more about this shawl. The shawl is called Dare to Dream, and yeah, basically I'm hoping that it will represent some kind of hope and a place where you can sit with your thoughts and dream about a brighter future or a brighter life for either for yourself or for people around you or for the world. I can't really decide that what you are dreaming about. but in my case it represents a lot of dreams that I hope that I can put to work. I plan them out carefully, so hopefully I will get there. But yeah, it's the beginning of a big journey for this shawl. Now I'm at the end of my row, and so you can see I have a lot of stitches going on my shawl, and lace looks a lot better after it's blocked, and this is not blocked in any way, so you get it scrunched up. But here is the edge and the big border up here, and then I will continue on with a third pattern now. I will just start at that lace pattern now with my next row. So it will be 3 different patterns going on in this shawl, and as you can see I have those more defined stitches in here, and that is called noobs. It's basically made out of a lot of stitches that you make into one stitch, and then on the next row you purl them all together. That is a little bit fiddly stitch to go through, and if you don't want to put that kind of stitch into the design, you can put a bead in each of the places where the noob would go. So yeah, it will be a very big shawl when it's done. I have a pin down here where the center is. As you can see, it's a big one coming, and you work it from the bottom up, and that is something that I haven't really found in any other shawl, traditional shawl design, that you work it from bottom up. And I think this was invented when the Estonians got circular needles, because there is no way you can fit all these stitches onto a straight needle and knit it comfortably, because it's quite heavy at the moment. But once the circular needles came around, they saw that they need to have something that could be worked in one piece, because traditionally you sew on the lace border on an Estonian shawl or a Haapsalu shawl, and that is not something that most knitter wants to do. It's a little bit fiddly, and yeah, but it's really fun to do it. It creates a very, very, very different approach to it when you knit the lace border separately and then sew it on, because you can get more, I wouldn't say ruffle, but almost like a ruffle, because you sew it not like one-to-one. For example, here on the tip of the shawl, you can sew it like it gets more fabric around the corner for the lace, and that creates a little bit of a different feel than it does when you knit it all in one piece like I have done here. Now, when it comes to Estonian shawls, it's when it comes to Estonian shawl, there is a rich knitting history behind them. As many knitting things in Scandinavia, at least in, I wouldn't say like modern time, but in modern history maybe. It comes from people being poor and wants to find something that they can sell so that they can make some money. You see it with the boho sweaters in Sweden. You see it with the binge sweaters also in Sweden, in the west coast of Sweden. You see it in the Haapsalu shawls, and I heard it someplace else, but I forgot about it. But the Haapsalu shawl, this was not something that they wore like every day. Haapsalu was this cure restoration village, or what do you call it? Kurort in Swedish. I don't really know how to say that in English. And so a lot of rich people came there to take baths in this good place or in this good water, and they have like historical hotels and restaurants and everything where this rich people came to have a vacation. And as there were a rich knitting history in Estonia, there is still a rich knitting history in Estonia. The local knitters saw the opportunity to knit this very special lace shawls and sell them off to these rich ladies who wanted to have pretty things around them and something exclusive. So they started to knit lace shawls for them, and many Swedish rich people from like Stockholm and the East Coast sailed to Estonia to go there on this vacation time. And yeah, a lot of shawls ended up in Sweden, among other places, because they also had German visitors and Russian, of course. And yeah, but they knitted the shawls as a way to make some extra money. And during the time that they knitted the shawls, they come up with some really, really wonderful patterns. And now there is even a lace center in Haapsalu where you can go visit and have a look at old shawls and a lot of different samples of the lace. And you can buy yarn, and you can buy some shawls too that these lace knitting masters have done. So even still, you can go there and you can buy a shawl so someone have hand knitted for you. And if you're lucky, you will even meet the person that have hand knitted it to you. I did not buy a shawl when I was there. I bought some lace yarn, but I haven't gotten around to using it yet, since I'm using my own yarn with some silk in instead of a pure wool yarn. But it's a wonderful place, and if you are interested in the Haapsalu history, Haapsalu shawls, or Estonian knitting history, that is definitely a place to go visit. It's really rich in history, and the ladies that are there knitting are, I wouldn't say adorable because it sounds like they're a baby, but they're very nice, and they really enjoy when you come there and you want to learn about the knitting. So go there if you have the chance for it. And yeah, it's still, Estonia is one of my favorite places that I've been to, and I so want to go there again. And someday it will be a reality. It's one of the dreams that I want to carry out, and that this shawl definitely inspires me to. And what else? Well, that was part of the design and part of the history, and I'm still working along, and it's hard to keep eye contact because it's so small yarn, or maybe not small yarn, but you need to be careful to catch every stitch, because since it's silk in this yarn, it does run around. Now it runs down. If I drop a stitch, it runs down, and I need to fix it, and that takes a little while to do. So that's why I want to keep an eye on my knitting. It's not perfectly something that I could do without looking. And yeah, you only get to see this backside and my hands moving. But as I said, I'm using a yarn with silk in it. Traditionally, this type of shawls were knitted with wool, very fine white wool. And yeah, I've added silk to my yarn because I think it looks very nice and very shiny and adds in some exclusivity that you can do at this point of time. But a pure wool yarn that has good drape, that also works very nice. And it's something that is very pretty when it's knitted up in that. This yarn that I'm using, it has 2 plies, which means that it's 2 strands twined together to make this yarn. And I would say when knitting lace, keep to either a 2-ply or a single ply yarn, because if you go up to a 3-ply, then it's much rounder and your yarn overs won't show as well as they do with a 1 or a 2-ply yarn. Most lace yarns that I have found have been 2-plies, so I don't even know if there is a 3-ply, but even if you do it in a thicker yarn or a thicker, thicker yarn and thicker needles in that case, or bigger needles, then the lace shows off best in a 2-ply yarn. So something to learn and to remember. I've knitted lace in other yarns too, but a 2-ply that is not too tightly twisted, that shows off the lace very pretty. Then you want to have something that also have a bit of drape in it, so it's not maybe the scrunchiest merino that you can, or that you want to use in a shawl, because that tends to scrunch back. You see, I dropped a stitch now. Here we go. Okay. We will take it back up. Okay. So a good fiber for a shawl could be alpaca, even if I wouldn't use pure alpaca, because that just keeps on growing and growing and growing, and it doesn't have memory that will let you get it back to its original shape. I would use something that has a little bit of wool contained in with it, or you can use like BFL, blue-faced Leicester sheep, or their wool. Actually, you won't use the entire sheep. That also have a great long fiber that is a little bit drapey. And silk, of course you can use silk. This is actually a silk merino blend, so I'm using the merino to scrunch up a little bit or scrunch back, and the silk adds drape and shine to the yarn. And what else can you use? And I've seen lace shawls knitted out of like rustic wool, and that is so pretty. Like, it gives a total other dimension to the lace shawl when you get this fairly rustic yarn that you knit a delicate item like a lace out of. And yeah, that is really something I like. But in this case, I'm working with silk merino yarn in one of my hand-dyed colors called silver, and I really like to dye the lace yarn, because you need to be a little bit careful with colors and make sure that you're very delicate to the yarn, because it gets very easily twisted and then you end up with a white patch somewhere. So it's a little bit tough. It demands a lot of things, but very, very, very pleasurable to knit with. And I do enjoy working with it as much as I can. I'm coming to the end here. I said I was gonna start on next lace repeat. Well, next lace repeat starts with knit the entire row and then purl back, because in Estonian knitting you always purl the rows back. So even if you have a complicated front, you will always have a rest row on the way back, except for when you're purling the loops together. And I think I managed to even, yeah, just say swoosh across the middle here. And I won't take that stitch marker, I will take this stitch marker so I can fix it on the way back. Let's see, here's the middle. We'll put in the stitch marker here and I will remember to fix that. So here is how I fixed the missed double decrease that I didn't do in the middle. You see the stitch marker? There is where I want to have my decrease. So I start by purling until I reach the stitch marker and I slip it across. Now the decrease will happen over these 3 stitches that I slip onto the next needle, and then I turn my work because the decrease is easier to do from the front. And then I drop down 1 row or 1 stitch. So on these 3 stitches that are involved in the double decrease, I drop them down 1 row. So I have the strand going across the back, and then I do my decrease just like I normally would, and I use the loose strand to pick up to actually make the new stitch that the decrease is. And then I flip my knitting back and just purl across. Let's see, it's a little bit fiddly here to be able to record at the same time, but just purl like I normally would do. So, some purling now. Well, I actually need to go check on my pots before I can purl back. And it's been really fun to knit a bit with you and to chat about the Haapsalu shawls. I hope you will have a great week and that we see each other next week for some more knit talk. Have a great week. Happy knitting. Bye.